The staff laughed, joked, and treated him like he didn't exist. Then he revealed his true identity, and suddenly no one was laughing anymore. The afternoon sun spilled through the wide glass windows of the department store, casting pale beams across polished tiles. Inside, the air hummed with quiet monotony, the low buzz of fluorescent lights, the occasional rustle of paper bags, and the distant chatter of shoppers moving from aisle to aisle. Nothing about the scene was extraordinary. It was the kind of day where everything seemed to fold into routine, where smiles at the register felt practiced and footsteps blended into background noise. Amid the flow of customers, a tall black man stepped through the sliding doors. He moved with quiet assurance, his posture steady, his presence calm but deliberate. His clothes were neat, pressed with care, yet understated. Nothing about him called for attention, though he carried himself with the ease of someone who belonged anywhere he chose to walk. A faint breeze followed him in, stirring the faint scent of new fabric and polished wood displays. Around him, other shoppers strolled lazily, some cradling baskets filled with bargains, others lingering at racks of discounted clothes. The man blended effortlessly into this landscape, neither hurried nor hesitant, yet there was a subtle weight in the way he glanced across the store, a softness in his gaze that hinted at patience layered over something deeper. He wasn't here for spectacle, nor for small indulgences. His presence was quiet but steady, like a stone in a stream unmoved, watching, letting the world pass around him. The store carried on as though nothing had changed, unaware that his entrance had shifted the air just slightly. To the clerks and customers, he was simply another shopper. But for him, this afternoon was more than routine. It was the beginning of an observation that would test more than merchandise. The man's entrance stirred no welcome. Behind the counter, a young clerk lifted her head just long enough to notice him, her eyes flicking across his figure before darting away as though she had seen nothing at all. Her lips curled into a smile almost instantly, but it was reserved for the next customer who walked in behind him, a man with wrinkled jeans and mud-caked sneakers, yet greeted as though he were royalty. "Good afternoon. Can I help you with anything?" she asked brightly, leaning forward with sudden warmth. The tall black man continued on without interruption, his face calm, unreadable. He passed through aisles lined with folded shirts and neat displays of shoes, his hands occasionally brushing against fabrics as though testing their quality. Around him, the rhythm of the store moved on, yet his presence seemed to dissolve into the air, unacknowledged by those paid to notice. Another employee hurried past, arms filled with hangers, and cast him a fleeting glance. No smile, no greeting, not even a polite nod. Yet when a pair of young women entered the same aisle, laughter in their voices, the clerk's demeanor changed. She swooped in instantly, asking if they needed sizes, offering to check in the back. He paused for a moment, his eyes following the exchange. His expression didn't shift, but there was a stillness in him, a patience so deliberate it almost radiated. To anyone watching, he was simply browsing quietly, but within, he was observing, taking note of tones, of gestures, of who was seen and who was overlooked. Though ignored, he did not bristle. Instead, he walked with the same unhurried steadiness, as though invisibility had its own clarity. Silence was his shield, and watchfulness his quiet reply. The man's steady walk carried him deeper into the store, where racks of neatly pressed shirts gave way to shelves stacked with shoes. From the inside pocket of his jacket, he slipped out a small leather notepad. It was unobtrusive, no larger than his palm. With a quick glance around, he flipped it open and made a brief note, his pen moving in short, precise strokes. The gesture was so subtle it could have been mistaken for a shopping list. But his eyes told a different story. He leaned down to examine a row of sneakers, running his fingers along the price tags. His gaze lingered, not on the colors or sizes, but on how the tags were arranged, some crumpled, some missing. He straightened, jotting something again before sliding the notepad back out of sight. Meanwhile, laughter drifted from the counter. The clerk was leaning over, animated in her conversation with another customer. Her words, light and cheerful, carried easily across the quiet store. When the black man walked past and paused near the register, she didn't break her rhythm. She brushed him off with a half-hearted nod, eyes already locked back on her preferred company. In another aisle, the staff members joked with each other as they restocked shelves. When the man stepped closer, waiting for acknowledgement, they grew suddenly absorbed in their task, voices softening until he passed. Then, almost on cue, their chatter resumed. It was subtle, like a pattern woven invisibly between interactions. The warmth reserved for some, the cold indifference for others. Each slight glance, each missed greeting, etched itself into his quiet memory. He wrote nothing now, but the stillness in his face revealed the truth. He had already recorded more than words could capture. A sudden commotion broke the quiet rhythm of the store. Near the beverage cooler, a young customer fumbled with his cup, sending a splash of soda across the polished floor. The sound was sharp, liquid pattering against tile. Almost instantly, two employees rushed forward, voices concerned, arms loaded with paper towels and a bright yellow caution sign. "Don't worry about it, we've got it covered," one said with a cheerful grin, bending down to mop the mess. The other laughed softly, reassuring the embarrassed customer that accidents happen all the time. Their tone was warm, practiced, the kind reserved for valued guests just a few steps away. The tall black man lifted a box from the shelf, studying his label with quiet focus. He turned, catching the eye of the clerk at the counter. His voice, steady and polite, carried across the space. "Excuse me, could you tell me if this comes in another size?" The clerk barely looked up. Her eyes flicked toward the product, then away. "If it's not there, we don't have it," she muttered, already pivoting back to her conversation with another customer. The man remained still for a moment, the box resting in his hands. The half-answer hung in the air like a dismissed thought, sharp against the background hum of the store. A flicker of disappointment moved through him, but it did not rise into anger. His expression stayed composed, his shoulders relaxed. Only his eyes shifted, narrowing slightly, sharper now, as though every detail was a thread being woven into a larger pattern. He placed the box gently back on the shelf, his silence deliberate. Beneath the calm, something stronger pulsed. Not frustration alone, but resolve. He was watching more closely than ever, and nothing escaped him now. Nearly an hour passed before the tall black man returned to the front of the store. His steps were measured, unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. The chatter of clerks and customers carried on around him, but when he reached the counter, the air seemed to shift. He placed his small notepad gently on the surface, its worn leather cover folding open just enough to reveal scribbled notes inside. For the first time since he had entered, he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, but it carried a quiet authority that cut through the background noise. "I think I've seen enough." The clerk blinked, caught off guard. Her polite smile faltered into confusion. "I'm sorry," she stammered, searching his face for meaning with unhurried precision. The man reached into his jacket and withdrew a slim black wallet. From it, he pulled a badge, its metallic crest catching the overhead light. He set it beside the notepad, the title engraved in sharp letters, Corporate Service Auditor. The laughter in the store dimmed. Conversations trailed into silence. Even the soft hum of the light seemed louder in the pause that followed. The clerk's color drained, her once easy confidence replaced by a stunned rigidity. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. He looked at her steadily, not unkindly, but with the weight of truth in his gaze. The man who had been invisible moments ago now commanded every eye in the room. He was not just a shopper. He was the one whose judgment mattered most. And in that instant, everyone in the store realized that the indifference, the dismissive smiles, the selective warmth, they had not gone unnoticed. They had been recorded. The silence at the counter stretched, heavy and suffocating, until the man finally lifted his notepad. His voice, when he spoke, was even calm, but edged with the weight of authority. "Fairness is not optional," he said, his gaze steady on the clerk, who now shifted uneasily behind the counter. "Respect, dignity, basic acknowledgement, these are the foundations of good service. Without them, everything else collapses." He flipped through the notepad, each page filled with sharp, deliberate handwriting. He began to read, his tone measured, but every word struck like a stone against glass. Selective attention toward certain customers. Laughter and warmth extended to some, while others are ignored. A complete dismissal of questions asked politely. Professional standards neglected. Accountability absent. The clerk's eyes darted downward, her earlier confidence stripped away. Behind her, two employees exchanged nervous glances, the reality of their behavior closing in like a storm. The manager arrived in a rush, breathless from being summoned. "Sir, what seems to be the issue?" His voice trembled when he noticed the badge still glinting on the counter. The auditor's reply was steady, unhurried. "The issue," he said, "is that your team has forgotten the simplest principle. Every customer deserves equal respect. Today, they offered smiles and service only where they chose to. That is not professionalism, it is favoritism, and it will not be overlooked. The manager's face paled as he absorbed the words. His hands tightened against the counter's edge. He knew instantly the gravity of what had transpired, that this was no minor complaint, no passing dissatisfaction. This was a record that would travel beyond these walls, one that could decide the future of the store itself. And in that moment, shame and fear filled the space where casual laughter had once been. The store had fallen into an uneasy stillness. The clerks no longer laughed, their eyes lowered as if the polished floor itself demanded their full attention. The manager lingered near the counter, fumbling with words he could not find, and at the center of it all stood the man who, an hour earlier, had walked in unnoticed, now impossible to ignore. He closed his notepad with a soft snap and slipped it back into his jacket. The badge disappeared just as quietly, but the impression it left behind would not fade. For a moment longer, he let his gaze sweep across the room. He did not glare. He did not raise his voice. Yet the silence carried his message louder than any reprimand could. Then, with the same calm presence that had marked his entrance, he turned and walked toward the glass doors. His steps echoed softly against the tile, each one carrying the weight of finality. No one dared stop him, though all eyes followed. The doors slid open with a sigh, and the afternoon light poured in, wrapping around him as he stepped back into the brightness of day. In his absence, the air felt different, heavier, sharper, as though the store itself had been judged. The clerk shifted uncomfortably, aware that the indifference they once thought harmless had been seen, measured, and recorded. The narration lingers in the silence he left behind. You never know who is watching. A stranger may be more than they appear, but the lesson should not depend on titles or badges. Every person, no matter how they look or who they are, is worthy of dignity. Treat people with respect, not because of who they might be, but because it is the right thing to do.